Hey, everybody, it's Richard Harris, Scott Leese with a very unique and different episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. We're excited to talk about it and wish we didn't have to kind of a topic because we think it's stuff that people just don't know. And so we want to help people with that. We are the only special guests, so hopefully we don't need to introduce ourselves. But the goal of this conversation, we're going to talk about negotiating severance. Right? What does it mean? How do you do it? What can you do it? What can you do with it? How much leverage do you really have, and all those kind of things. And so we're going to take two approaches. One approach is, as we've all seen at certain levels, people leave a company or are asked to leave and they get this big payout. Like, at what stage of our career could I even ask for that? How do I ask for it? When do you ask for it? All those kind of things. And then we're going to talk about the other side, where maybe we're just a sales director, sales manager, or individual contributor, and you're going through these mass layoffs, or just a layoff, or even getting terminated. Do you have any leverage to negotiate there? So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Scott. How are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there, man. Want to give a shout out to our good friends over at HubSpot. Surf and Sales Podcast is a part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. I appreciate them and their support. I'm hanging in there, man. The severance thing is a wild topic. So many people getting laid off from big companies, from Microsofts and Twitters and Amazons of the world. And you see these big splashy headlines where, they got 6 months severance or 9 months severance. And as you called it, like big money. And I think a lot of people feel like that should trickle down into more of the startup SaaS ecosystem. And I think people are finding out that that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's kind of a rude awakening.
Yeah. So I saw it and I was like, well, okay, Mr. Benioff, please hire me and fire me. Like, I'll take 5 months. I'll do it. Like, that's a good deal. So, but
a lot longer than any that I would have ever gotten.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Yes. So let's talk about severance sort of on the front end, right? Because I know you've been through this a couple of times. Like, at what stage is it even possible to think about negotiating your exit while negotiating your entry, right? It ain't easy, and it's probably very scary.
Yeah, I don't really, I never brought it up until I was a VP.
Right.
And even then, I never brought it up until I had been a VP a few times. Not because I shouldn't have or couldn't have. I think I just didn't know, number one. And number two, I was probably a little scared because it's kind of a weird thing.
So how did it come up the first time?
And then talking about, well, what happens if I, get the boot or whatever. I think you bring it up in the context of this is actually shared risk. If I'm a VP of sales and have, pretty good experience and whatnot, and if I'm specifically going towards earlier stage organizations, there's shared risk here. You're risking as a founder bringing me on board, that I know what the heck I'm doing and I'm going to be able to move the needle and get sales going and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also risking that your product actually works, does what it says it's going to do, that you're going to support customers well and be able to retain anybody that I come on board and manage the business responsibly from a financial perspective, right? So this is a way for me to ensure that if this goes south and I walk away or I get asked to leave for whatever reason, that I'm not panicked when I wake up the next morning and I have zero income and zero support going on, whether it's 2 weeks or 2 months or the remainder of the month's benefits. I really want to, be taken care of in some way. And that gesture to me is a sign of a company and a founder saying they recognize that there's risk on my end as well. So it's all got to be done up front for me.
So it's interesting too, because I also know you, even if you got a 6-month package and you would wake up the next morning panicked, just because I know you personally.
Well, that's more about my own neuroses than
Right.
Than reality.
But so how do you, I don't know if it's how did you bring it up? Or is it, since you've been through it, how would you bring it up now? That might be the right thing. So let's say it's someone who is going into, and believe me, people are still getting hired. Like I'm seeing it. And how do you bring it up? When do you bring it up in the interview process? Might be the first question.
Well, I would bring it up really towards the very end of the interview process, sort of in the offer phase. The how I would bring it up is kind of like I just described. It's talking about the shared risks that are involved.
Mm-hmm.
You could give specific examples. I might say to somebody, listen, there's a lot of cases where a head of sales takes a company from zero to the first, call it million or so, mm-hmm. in the first year and a half. And then the founders decide that they need somebody a little bit more established, more experienced, somebody who's done the 1 million to 10 million kind of sprint, and they get topped off. I get, somebody gets hired in above me and I get asked to leave. Right. Well, if that's, something that might happen, I want to be protected in that regard. So let's talk a little bit about, what that might look like on my way out, in terms of how much, cash I'm getting, in terms of benefits, in terms of, I don't know, do I get to keep my laptop, whatever some of the other, things might be. That's when I'm bringing it up. Right towards the end, I'm in the negotiation. They already want me to come on board. Right.
That was my question. Do you wait till you get the offer letter?
I don't know if I wait till I get the offer letter. I wait till it's sort of known that an offer letter is going to come my way. Right. Okay. So we're talking about terms, and you, the founder, are like, okay, Scott, it's going to be 250K base, 500K OTE, 1.5% equity. Does that sound like it's in range? Yep, that sounds pretty good. Let's also put in there, my benefits start on this particular day, and I get a laptop, and I get to go to 2 conferences a year, education stipend, and let's talk a little bit about severance. So I want to put the bug in their ear about it before they take the time to send me over the paperwork.
That makes sense. I mean, that's reasonable. That was the part I was like, well, because I think if I waited, my concern was, listening to you, was if I waited till after I got the offer letter, then I think we look swarmy, we look cheesy, and it's kind of like, a little unprofessional. Like, that's, to your point, it's all part of the entire package. So we should talk about it when you're talking about the entire package. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So, did it ever work?
Did it work? Yeah, of course it worked.
Yeah. So what kind of things were you able to negotiate?
Well, I once got paid for a year. Sort of part of it was a severance part, but it was really like reframed as a kind of a consulting type gig.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wasn't it like a consulting / advisor thing?
Yeah, a little bit, but it's it's just a reframing, I think. I had typical sort of keep your benefits for 6 weeks, we'll pay you for the next 6 weeks type of stuff. I think I had one that was 3 months severance. But I also had a bunch that I had nothing, like I said.
Yeah.
So I was anywhere from nothing to a lot. And a couple that were, kind of typical couple week things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think particularly for the founders who are listening, or those other people who are thinking about it, one advantage, and particularly to the way Scott was describing it, where they kept him on for a year in a consulting role, is that if someone's been there a year and they have equity, right, it's advantageous to still try to leverage that person, right? It's advantageous for this person to, I don't know, maybe have them, have someone ghostwrite a blog post for them on your blog because that person has a good following. If they've got a strong following, or you do have an advisory role where you say, hey, can you do this? Or, hey, can you come and talk to so-and-so, or go out and pitch so-and-so because you know them, or get us an introduction. Like, for someone like Scott, where it's like he still has equity waiting for that payout. Well, of course he's going to want that equity to play out. So, it's not adversarial to do that, right? It's to everyone to do
I mean, I think everybody wants to walk away on good terms.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody's saying nice things about everybody
Yeah.
else and whatnot, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's the ideal situation.
Yep. Yep. So, did you ever ask for it and they said no, and you took the job, or
No,
you ever
no, that
finally at
never
that
happened.
stage?
That never happened to me, actually. That ever happened to you?
Yes. My last
Really?
real job, not Mashery, but the one after that,
They
where
told you no on severance?
yeah, yeah.
Really?
They were negotiating hard on so much stuff, and I didn't have the knowledge, right? Like they wanted me to come in as a startup at like 75,000, and I'm like, I'm a consultant, I'm making this much. Why would I do this? I love the tech. I think it's great. I know it'll be earth shattering, and I turned down the job 3 or 4 times, like and they kept coming back and kept coming back and kept coming back. And I should have seen, and then finally they gave me a number I would live with. They gave me a decent number that I would take. And I should have seen the writing on the wall at that point that it shouldn't take 3 or 4 hour phone calls, 30-minute to 1 hour phone calls, right? It was
Yeah.
interesting because it was like, the more I say no, the more they're willing to do.
What was their argument on the reason that you shouldn't have severance?
Their rationale was that they were reading old blog posts that said, like I was also asking for like double trigger events and like all those things, and they were just resistant to all of it, um, uh, because they felt it put them at too much risk, right? And I don't think I had the right way. I was describing, but I have risk too, but I don't think I did a good job of of understanding how to do it, kind of like the way you explained it, right? And then, by the way, this is what's 2023. This was in 2012. This is 10 years ago, so it was
Yeah.
a different
But
world.
what
But
about people? What about people who are listening to this and they're like, "Oh shit, I didn't negotiate any severance whatsoever,"
yeah,
and now they're thinking, "Well, I should probably go try to get this in writing." Is that a good strategy? A dumb strategy in your mind? What should those
well,
people do?
it's March 2023, right? So there are going to be two answers to this. There's going to be Richard's answer, and then I'm going to hear what Scott has to say, because I'd be curious. I'd be afraid to do it, right? And I would be afraid to do it unless I already had I'd already been interviewing, was pretty confident I was going to have another job lined up, right? And I had some leverage. It's March 2023. If people have gone through layoffs, and depending on the size of the org,
Wait a second though. If you're thinking about leaving to go somewhere else,
right?
are you really trying to tell me that if your current employer came back to you and was like, "Hey, I'll give you a 6 month severance package," that would keep you?
No, I'm saying I need some kind of leverage, right? That if I were going to try and negotiate this, where my head was that as soon as I bring it up, they may put me on a bubble and try and get rid of me.
Yeah,
So if I'm going to go do this, I better start the interview process
I see.
before I say it. Maybe that's a better way to describe it. Not
Yeah.
that I'm necessarily going to have a job, but
Like you better be prepared. You better be prepared that your time is over.
right. So now, because Scott's the master of figuring out how to talk about this stuff, would you do it? How would you do it?
No, first of all, I'm definitely not the master of doing it because I failed to do it a few times. No, I would not do it. If I didn't do it up front and I just heard about this, that's like career suicide. Just like go up to my boss right now and be like, "Hey, I know we didn't talk about this a while ago, but all these riffs going on got me a little spooked. Can we talk about severance?" There's no way I would do that. I chalk it up to an L.
Right.
I'm taking a loss on this one. The next time I go get a job, I'm going to have the chat up front.
So now let me flip it this way. Let's say it's, a company like Salesforce or Microsoft or something, you probably couldn't do it because it'd be like, you're one of whatever. But let's say they go through layoffs, you're the top sales rep, right? And they're saving a whole bunch of money there. Do you then try and go in and say, yeah, I think I want to raise, not less severance? Do you leverage that? Because now they went from 20 reps down to 10. You're the top rep, you're a top 2 rep. Are you trying to leverage that for a raise? It's still, it might be a douche thing to do. It's a pretty dick thing to do.
I don't know. I don't know if I am. I think I'm probably not.
Yeah.
I think I'm recognizing what's going on around me, and I'm feeling a bit grateful that I still have a job, and in theory, I'm still performing pretty well.
Right.
I think what I would do is, if I can continue to perform well and ride this kind of cycle out, if and when things pick back up, then I would probably go back to them and be like, I stuck with you guys through this whole time. I performed at this particular level. I think I've earned XYZ raise. Because then I would feel more confident that if they told me no, the ecosystem out there would be more welcoming. To me.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. We've never had this conversation because this is the part where everybody thinks, Richard's the nice guy and Scott's sort of, the one with an attitude. And it's really the opposite, because my ego's like, fuck them, I'm going to go ask for a raise. I don't care if I'm a kid.
Well, how would you ask for it? What would be your justification?
My justification is, if I'm still a top rep, I'm confident I can get a better job somewhere. But that also opens this whole other door. Well, why are you even there if you think there's a better job? There's a whole other thing. But it's like, that's just how. But Scott, me, like my ego takes over sometimes, and so I could easily see myself doing that. Although, thank God I have you in my corner, because I could
just see the boss being like, listen, we're not giving out raises right now. We just had to let go of 15 people so we could save money and extend our runway.
Yep.
Right. We're keeping you on board because you've done an amazing job, but we're not giving out raises right now.
Yeah, and that's why you're keeping me on board, because I'm going to keep doing an amazing job. What happens if I leave? Right. So
yeah, I mean, you certainly would have that. You could play that card. I think a lot of people would sort of call your bluff right now.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, if you said that to me, I'd be like, okay, well,
good luck.
Good luck.
Yeah.
If you're able to find something that is attractive to you, that pays you way more, I can't stop you. Yeah. In fact, I wouldn't stop you. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, because I was also going to say that is how my ego works. But I know before I do it, I thank God I have a friend like you, because I'd be like, okay, Scott, I'm thinking about going and ask for a raise.
Yeah, you like call me up and be like, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Is it a good idea?
Right.
And I would say, no, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Although sometimes I wonder if Scott would be like, yeah, I want to see what happens. I want to watch this experiment. Like, you become the Frankenstein scientist.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm mischievous enough to be like, that would be a fun car crash to watch. I should encourage Richard to do that.
No, I don't think you would do that to me. All right, well, let's flip it. Let's talk about, so you didn't have a severance. You're an individual contributor and you are going through these layoffs, right? Have you ever negotiated severance at that stage? Have you ever had to negotiate on the way out the door?
No, never. I mean, I'm not sure what that would even look like. I mean, I suppose somebody comes to you and says, adios, here's 2 weeks pay, and you keep your benefits for the rest of March. My response is, yeah, that's not going to work for me. I need 4 weeks and 2 months benefits. Like, I have no idea how that conversation would work, because what is my leverage? Unless I have some sort of like dirt on the company or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what my leverage is.
Yeah.
So without leverage, I personally would be very hesitant. That doesn't mean I'm right.
Yeah.
Maybe if you just ask, you get it, but I would be very hesitant.
Yeah. So there's a couple of thoughts. So, because I've been talking about this and have done this, and it's different than if you're being let go for a reason, right? And it's different if you're being let go as part of a big group. A couple of things I remind people are that, one, when someone offers you any severance, I've yet to see or even hear that they rescind it because you start asking for more.
Hmm.
And if you're a part of a big group and you ask for more, they can't rescind it from you because they're giving it to everybody else. Then they open themselves up to a where they like.
Yeah, I guess I'm not worried about the rescinding of it. It's
Right.
just the like,
So
I don't want to be laughed at and be like, fuck
yeah.
you. No, no.
So that's one piece, right? So and I tell this to people because it's the mindset. Because a lot of people think, oh my God, they're going to take it away if I even say anything. That's the big. I hear
Yeah.
this, have this conversation. So I want people to understand that. Um, the other piece is that in most severance packages, there is this clause of non-disclosure, non-disparagement, and it's written very selfishly
In the
in
favor
favor
of the employer.
of the employer,
Yeah.
right? And it's kind of like, no, and we're going to go into a couple things on this because it's more than this, but prior to 2 weeks ago, which I'll explain in a minute, um, that to me is your leverage because it is a public marketplace, right? You do have the opportunity to go to Glassdoor. Now, whether or not you want to do those things, whether or not you will do those things are very different. But that is where your leverage, in my opinion, lies. Because, it's kind of like, when it gets out that this is a bad org to work for and the leadership is terrible, because every person they hire is going to go to Glassdoor in the tech world. They all know to go look for a review.
Yeah.
And when that happens, they're going to see it. And it could affect, theoretically, the ability for someone to hire the right person, right? So that is your leverage. And they will often threaten that if you do that, we're going to sue you and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, sue me for what? Like, I got nothing, right? I mean, there are things like your house and stuff like that, depends on the state. There are places there, but
Is it worth the energy and the stress and the risk?
that's what I explain to people. You have to decide, is this worth your time and energy, right? And is it an ego-driven thing? And I will tell people, you could get everything you want and you're still going to be angry and sad at them about it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to, you might get some relief, but that's where your leverage is. And then to your point, what you brought up earlier, I'm asking for more of benefits. I'm asking more for money. I'm asking for, um, you know, I don't think they would give you the laptop, right?
I got the laptop once.
Did you? So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
I kept it for 10 years. I kept using it for
Oh,
10
that's
years.
the one you just got rid of.
The one I just got rid of. Yeah.
So, um, you can ask for, you know, you could ask for a resume writer. You could ask for some professional coaching services. You could ask for other things um, along the way. And the worst thing they're going to do is tell you no, so you just take the deal. Now, the other thing I'll tell people all the time is, do not negotiate if you need this. If it's
If you what? If you need it?
yeah, like if you're like, I got to take.
Oh, I see. Like I have to have this severance. So
yeah, I gotta take what they got, right? I had someone come call me and say, hey, I work at one of these big companies that's giving out these many month severance and health benefits. And they're like, well, can I negotiate it? And I'm like, you can, but I don't know why you would. That's a pretty good deal. Like, it's what's it worth to you? Because you do have to consider, okay, do I want a positive, do I want to leverage my old boss to come and be a reference for me and network and all those kind of things. So you have to take all that into consideration. I just want people to know, I think you should ask for it. Like, the worst thing that ever happens is they say no. I don't want people to put themselves at risk or their family or their livelihood at risk. Don't do that. If you need it and you need to go on, go for it and move forward. So, so that's sort of that's that piece. Now, what's interesting is, and by the way, there's a whole other piece of leverage too, which is, depending on the state, certain states, they can't even do more than verify employment, right? You can also leverage and say, by the way, if I ever hear that you did a backdoor reference check on me, that's not okay. So the final piece I'll say is, also negotiate that non-disclosure, non-disparagement to be bilateral. You won't disparage me, I won't disparage you. Right? Even if you get no other money, you get nothing else, you can go in and I think ask for the non-disparagement to go both, to be bidirectional, right? There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. A lot of companies would say no. Then you got to decide how hard you're going to fight it and how much you really want the severance package, right? So, okay, then I'm not going to sign it because you're paying me for my silence. That's what they're doing. That's what a severance package is to pay you to be silent. And it's interesting because I have had this conversation. I'm like, well, you're paying me to be silent. And, you know, I think it's worth more than this $5,000 you're offering me. I think it's worth 10. And they're like, well, we can't pay that. I'm like, okay, then I'm not going to sign it. And they're like, well, we're still going to expect you to not say. It's like, well, no, you don't. Like, it doesn't work that way. But I was that last place where I had that whole negotiation thing. So that is, so look to that. Now, what's interesting, in the last 2 weeks, the National Labor Relations Board has declared that non-disparagement, non-disclosure parts of severance packages are illegal. They cannot be there at all. I tell everybody to please go do your research on this, go find a lawyer, go read your state laws, all that kind of stuff, because I know all that stuff matters. But that's also a piece of leverage too, of like, hey, by the way, here's an article. I don't think you can put those in there anymore. What do you think? Go take it to your lawyer. So
They're probably in there still. Somebody somewhere sent an offer today that's
I guarantee it 100%. So and I actually, Scott, you're gonna love this. How long do you think that case paper, that file was, like, if from the case? How many pages?
400.
No, it was about 50. I read them.
You read all of them?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And there's a whole thing in there about the union, because it came through a union thing. And I've asked some people around, do they think it was a union piece or not a union piece? So anyway,
you missed your calling, Richard. You need to go into HR.
No, dude, I don't want to deal with it. I don't
know. You say you don't want to deal with it, but you read all 50 pages.
But I want to be the antagonist. I want to be the person. I want to be the employee. I don't want to be the person in charge of all this stuff, right?
You could start a service for being a severance negotiation agent.
I bet. Well, I think I think there's a market for it. So I think that would be, problem is you're surviving in down times, right? Which is not a fun thing to do.
Yeah. Well, hey, we appreciate everybody stopping by and listening to today's episode of Surf and Sales Podcast, brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network.
Yep.
And we'll be back soon.
All right. Good chatting on this one. Thanks, Scott.
Yes, sir.